Hi everyone and welcome to the new video. Today I want to talk about vintage watches and I want to show stuff that personally I never saw on YouTube before. So it was kind of interesting find and I want to share it with you. This is an updated version of the video. The first one I did some time ago, but then I got new information and I think it's worth it to create an update. Here I have two watches made by Kienzle company. This is a German company that was founded in 1822, so it's pretty old company. And interestingly, this company still exists today, so maybe it's one of the oldest watch manufacturers in the world. And as we know, in the beginning of the 20th century, lots of watch manufacturers used radium paint, so the watch was glowing in the dark and it was cool at that time. There were no LEDs, no batteries. There was an infamous story of the radium girls, women who died in the United States because they used a radium paint without proper protection. But technology was improved later and the radium paint was used for decades, so it was pretty successful at the time, I must say. So what is interesting in these two watches? As we can see, they both look pretty similar. They're made by the same company. It's a nice portable design. They can be kept in the bag or even in the pocket. But of course, I wouldn't keep this watch in the pocket nowadays because, as we know, it is radioactive. So I can do a simple test. I can turn on my Geiger counter. So as we can see, this watch is radioactive, but it is kind of normal for watches from that era. It is not dangerous. I would not keep this watch in the pocket, but it's safe to keep it in the cabinet. But the second watch is completely different. I can measure it and we can see that the radiation is barely detectable. This makes me curious to figure out why it happens and what's the difference. It turned out that the problem is much more complex than I originally thought. It even makes it more exciting, so let's see what's going on. Apparently at that time manufacturers already understood that the radiation can be dangerous and they tried to experiment with different compounds. But what did they actually do and can we see it? Yes, we can. But to do this we need another type of radiation detector, a scintillation gamma spectrometer. This is a Geiger counter, it has a good sensitivity and it can show us if the object is radioactive or not, but it cannot tell us why it is radioactive. And to know the answer, I will use another type of device. It's the scintillation detector. It uses completely different principle. A scintillation detector can show us the spectrum of the particle's energy, so we can determine which component is inside the compound. The spectrum collection takes several hours, and because of the magic of the video, you will see it right now. This is the first spectrum and we can see here the classical spectrum of radium and its decay products. We can see these peaks. This is a classical radium dial that was used in the 30s, 40s and 50s. But the second spectrum is completely different. First, the spectrum looks like an Americium, but apparently Americium was never used in vintage watches. This particular watch was made in Germany and they found a page on the Bundesamt für Strahlenschutz. This is a government authority in Germany, and on this page we can find that Promethium was used on vintage watches. But the interesting thing is that the half-life of Promethium is only less than 3 years, so in theory now we should not be able to detect it at all, so the question is still open, why this watch is radioactive? Just for fun, I decided to ask ChatGPT if Americium was used in vintage watches, and here is the answer. As we can see, the answer is pretty clear. Americium was not used in the vintage watches, but I see it on the spectrum. Then I asked ChatGPT if it is possible to detect Promethium nowadays, and the answer you can see on the screen, 99.9999% has already decayed. As a next test, I decided to make a more detailed comparison. We know that the Americium is used in the smoke detectors, so I took a smoke detector and got a spectrum from the Americium. And as we can see, they are pretty close. We can see that the peak mostly match, so apparently it is still an Americium, but it shouldn't be there. Probably it was an impurity of the production process. Another interesting thing about Promethium is its short half-life. So apparently when manufacturers did this watch with Promethium, they knew that they will be glowing only several years. But the Wikipedia page about Promethium also confirmed that it was used for the luminous paint. So apparently it was okay for the manufacturers to make a luminous paint that was designed to glow for 3-5 years. It's the same like for tritium that is still used today for some watches. We know that the half-life of tritium is not so long, but most people don't expect to buy watches and use them for 30-50 years, so it's kind of okay. That's it for this video, thanks for watching, I hope you learned something new. In this video we saw two vintage watches, one is a classical one, it has a radium dial and we know that it is radioactive. And the second one is apparently much more rare. It was made in the time when the manufacturer switched from radium to promethium. The question why it is radioactive is still open, because promethium should not be detectable today, it has a short half-life. If you have some interesting watches at home or you have any ideas about this video, feel free to write a comment below. Thanks for watching and see you next time.